Hey, folks. Welcome into the BN Cubs podcast. I am Brett Taylor, joined by Michael Cerami here to talk Cubs, brought to you by our good friends at Ankin Law, 3126 million if you got them legal needs. Coming off a really good week of baseball for the Cubs. And we'll zero in on some of the specifics of that, but I kind of wanted to stay at the widest lens first, particularly because maybe I'm the only one who's as susceptible to this as I think. Like maybe, you know, we sort of do that. I
know exactly where you're going. The third game
thing. Yeah, we do that as people where we assume like the way I react to something is how everybody feels. And so for me, it is like so obvious that it almost bears no discussion that if a team is going to take 2 of 3 in a series, which we of course agree is a good thing against a good team, right? But if they lose that third game, I will feel so much worse about a series than if they had lost the first game on the next 2. And it's a little bit of that is just the chronology, is the timing of things. But a little bit of it, admittedly, is, well, but you had a chance to sweep. You were right there with a chance to sweep. And so the Cubs did that twice, obviously, this past week. They took 2 of 3 from a previously undefeated Padres team, and they took 2 of 3 from a very successful so far Rangers team. So those are, I mean, there's no version where you're like unhappy about that outcome. 4 of 6 on a homestand for those games. It's just great. It's a great outcome. And yet I'm here doing my hemming and hawing because there's a part of me that sort of like feels like I'm providing the but, you know, like it's great, but you know, and so am I on an island with that, or is that how everybody feels, or what?
No, I mean, I think that's how everyone feels, but I also think the other part of that you missed is that it's not just not getting the sweep on the one hand, because that's obviously part of it, but also when you do it the other way, there's 2 versions of that. The first version is you lose the first game, right? And then you battle back to win the last 2, and you got 2 games in a row, and it's like you know, or you win 1, lose 1, and then you won the series on the third day. So it's like, it's not just getting back to neutral for 2 wins. It's like the other way to win 2 games out of 3 are both have their own positive narratives that are like equal and opposite to losing the third game. But also I would say that losing the San Diego series was more painful because of how the third game was lost.
Right. They could have.
The Rangers was like, we kind of lost it early. When Shota's getting kicked around, it's like
when he gets knocked around. Yeah. Well, so maybe the better question then is, the way you framed that got me thinking is, are we just talking about our experience as fans, or do we think this matters at all to the players? Like if they, like what you were saying, where you're like, well, they battled back and they won the 2, or they won the swing game. Do you think that has any impact going forward on a team whatsoever? Or are these guys all such pros that it's like, it just does not impact them one way or another?
I don't know if it does. You know what it almost reminds me of more? It's almost more so like a closer or reliever of any type getting a scoreless 8th, or like the save in the 9th, or bouncing. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of the same thing, but I also like, I'm so sick and tired of talking about everything like that. It's a sport. Let's just pretend like it doesn't matter. Like,
I like that.
What's the point? Who cares? Like,
yeah, I think it's funny. It's like a whole separate conversation, but there's something about the statistical revolution in baseball and the way we can quantify so much has really, like, it was a great thing. And we rode that wave for a very long time at BN. And I think we did a good job of helping illuminate a lot of that stuff for fans. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even necessarily saying we went too far, but like, I do think it's just as important to take these opportunities, like what you're saying, and underscore that, like, who cares what it means for the next game? Is there's actually a 2% statistical edge who cares? We experienced it, and this is how we felt.
Yeah. Wait, let me bring up another one. And so don't feel like you have to, if you don't agree with this, because even though it's kind of in line with what we're saying, please push back. But I think about this a lot. So, you know, when we, like, sometimes when I'm doing the pregame, I will often be like, here's the matchup history between this pitcher and the Cubs hitter, right? And a lot of times it's like, you might be like 10 at bats, nothing sample, right? Obviously that's meaningless in the statistical realm of predictable, value in that data, right? However, let me pose a hypothetical, and this is not directly applying to anyone. I'm just in theory. Let's say Kyle Tucker or anyone, say a Suzuki, has 10 at-bats against whichever pitcher we're facing next, only 10 in his career, and he's 10 for 10. Are we seriously going to say, well, it's only 10 at-bats, that doesn't mean anything? I think it's kind of absurd to be like, well, it's only 10 is such a small sample. I don't know. It seems like maybe, possibly, there's something about this pitcher that Seiya Suzuki does see well or whatever. Or if conversely, if he's 0 for 10 with 10 Ks, I'm not going to be like, yeah, he's probably going to play up to his statistical averages. How can you, I know I'm supposed to feel that way, but I don't. I feel like that does matter when it's to the extremes. Do you have any?
Yeah. So I wouldn't push back on that entirely. What I would note is because baseball is a game of failure on the offensive side, where that's the more probable outcome, I tend to think there's more signal in an 0 for 10 with 10 strikeouts that's more likely to tell us, oh, maybe he just doesn't see this pitcher very well. Whereas you're 10 for 10, we'd really have to drill in on, like, are we talking 5 bloopers and we talking where he made bad swing decisions but was rewarded for it, or are we talking about 10 bullets where he was like, it was a 10 pitch at bat and he saw everything this guy has and he's like on it every time, which I know is not necessarily in the spirit of what you're asking. I'm doing
that's
that
kind of, but that's the point. I
down.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, because he could be over 10 with 10 lineouts, and then you might be like, well, he actually does see him really well.
Sure. I think, there's a reason that the opinions on this topic vary wildly between a lot of analysts and teams, and some managers clearly put a lot of stock in it. I think some players clearly would say, no, I see this guy really well. Like, I know I can hit this guy. And we know, of course, too, that like the more exposure you get to a pitcher in a game, at least, right, that we know that is predictive of more success. And we say that about young players all the time. Well, he's got to learn the league. He's got to sort of develop and sort of see these pitches from these guys. So like, yeah, I'm with you that I think it's dismissed a little too out of hand as like, oh, that's just small sample, which I guess brings it back to sort of the bigger thing is that it's easy to use advanced analytics to be really dismissive of a lot of fan stuff. We can say it's small samples, so let's bring it back to these two series, Padres, Rangers, and we're just gonna live in the small sample, baby. Like, but I mean, there were a lot of things that were very heartening to see in these two series that you hope translates across the rest of the season. I think the topic that I found myself continuously landing on for 3 of the 4 wins at a minimum is how much this offense can bail out this bullpen. And it's a thing that fans of other teams are very aware of this concept, right? Really, really good teams. They see this all the time. We are not as familiar with this as Cubs fans of the last 20 years, that even when they had good teams, maybe 2016 is the exception, and there were a couple chunks of the year in 15 and 17. But like, generally speaking, Cubs have had decent bullpens by the end of the year. They've blown a lot of games in the first 2 months as they've settled into rhythms of who's going to do what. And I recognize that's true of a lot of teams too, but it's been a very familiar rhythm for the Cubs across managers, across two
definitely different for it's definitely different for the Cubs because it's the MO of the front office to set it up that way.
Sure. There you go.
You know what I mean? Right.
And generally they've, especially in the last 10 years, have had offenses that were like skewing defensive. And they didn't have this like overwhelming offense that was going to be able to stack runs in a game, neutering the ability of the bullpen to blow it. And we saw that a lot. And we saw it certainly in Oakland Sacramento. I wondered if I would do that sometime over the next 3 years. We certainly saw that. And when you have an offense that can put up 10 runs in a game and it does not feel like they had this huge offensive game, which they did that multiple times. It was just sort of like, they're just having a normal game. Oh, 10 runs. Actually, 10 runs is a lot of runs. It provides the obvious thing. Most people focus on, well, you're not out of it. Like we saw in the finale of the Rangers series, 6-1, right? Well, the Rangers are still trying to steal bases in the ninth.
Yeah.
Bruce Bochy is doing pitching change in the ninth to try to optimize matchups. And I half joke that that's a respect thing.
I saw you say that.
Yeah. But I'm not entirely joking. Like, that is a recognition that this offense can put up a lot of runs. And so there's that factor. But like I said, I was really focused on, boy, is it nice when they keep stacking runs and you just don't have to worry as much about what the bullpen might do.
Yeah, no, I think the big differentiator this year is not, well, so obviously like Kyle Tucker is a huge difference maker, right? Obviously his level of consistency, been on base every single game since the opener in Tokyo, is unparalleled. And he doesn't just have that baseline, like, the sort of on base baseline that maybe Ian Happ or Suzuki had. He also has like that high variance upside where like his bad games are he's on once or twice with a walk and a single. That's his bad game. His great games are incredible, right? But right now, and the Cubs offense succeeded in similar ways last year. Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner are both contributing a ton. Nico's hitting
those are the two I was thinking about too.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's hitting for power right now. And he's had, at least off the top of my mind, maybe 2 near basket shots. I mean, he's like, that's all of his homers are like that front row of Wrigley or the basket.
Yeah.
So when he misses by like a foot, you're like, okay, he's almost at his personal peak. And he's already got, I think, 4 homers already. Nico's was hitting for an extremely high average, which has come in handy a bunch because the Cubs have the highest walk rate in the league. So they're getting on base a ton. So a guy like Nico coming up and clearing the bases by hitting for average is especially valuable. And that just stretches the lineup so much further. And I don't want to dismiss this because it's been incredibly important. Their base running has been incredible, not just taking extra bases, not just stealing bases, but when they're beating out force outs, ground outs at second base to extend innings. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that is truly absurd.
You can go an entire season with not seeing your favorite team do that, right? Beat out a play at second base in a way that affects the game. I've gone many seasons where I don't remember ever seeing that. And they've done it at least 3 times already this year that you could sort of backwards work your way into. They won this game because they made a play at second base. And
okay. I have a perfect, I wanted to bring up this catcher thing, and this is a perfect example and opportunity to do it. I was thinking like, how am I going to bring this up? So for everyone that's listening at home, I was like talking to Brett before we started the pod, and I was like, I want to talk about the catchers, but I can't figure out the right angle in. Well, here's something. When we're talking about the offense, the Cubs catchers this season so far have a 155 weighted runs created plus, which is absurd. It's 5th best in baseball. And they have been worth 0.8 WAR, which is 2nd best in baseball. Huge, obviously, right? And I was thinking about the Cubs catching tandem, and it was like, obviously Carson Kelly had his cycle game, which was insane. Miguel Amaya has been looking good and strong. And I was kind of wondering like about their splitting time together, because it's been pretty close to 50-50, but it's not quite just splitting 50-50. What I personally hadn't realized, and maybe a lot of people did, is that Miguel Amaya has significant reverse splits for his career, meaning he's hitting righties a lot better than lefties. And Carson Kelly is the exact opposite. Miguel Amaya versus righties, 100 weighted runs created plus. Kelly versus lefties, 119 weighted runs created plus. So when I went and looked, sure enough, 4 out of the 5 games that the Cubs have faced left-handed starters, Carson Kelly is starting that game. So they have a built-in lefty-righty platoon behind the plate that plays to each guy's strength, even though they're both righties. If we believe Miguel Amaya is going to continue on the same track, which is we'll see. And that is on top of the fact that Kelly is obviously a huge bump over Yan Gomes and everyone else that the Cubs had behind the plate last year, both offensively and defensively. So their catching tandem is just like another piece of this offensive puzzle that on a smaller scale, sure, works perfectly to support the entire offense being a lot deeper than it has been in the past.
2 things on that. Neither of which take away from your point, which I totally agree. And I do want to, and that's early, I'm not taking any victory laps, but in the offseason, one of the things I banged several times was don't sleep on how much of a significant upgrade the Cubs might have behind the plate this year versus last year. Mm-hmm. It was a 3 or 4 win difference. You could, even if you went with conservative projections. And that is, it's tracking to be even more than that. But no, two things on noting that duo as a platoon that I think are just worth keeping in mind over the full season. One, catcher platoons are very difficult to maintain because pitchers develop relationships with catchers, and then you sort of have to internally do that math of, okay, we like Kelly matching up against this opposing starter, but we really like when he catches Ben Brown, or however it might work out, right? So even as it has played out very well to the Cubs' benefit so far this year, I would caution folks not to get pissed off if they check back in 2 months and they're like, why is he always playing against lefty? Because the Cubs may have determined that there are other considerations that matter more. Second thing, relatedly, is real tough thing for young players coming up is when you see guys without a ton of pro experience. Miguel Amaya, he was an international prospect, so he played a lot of games when he was younger. So he maybe doesn't quite fall into this, but he had all those injuries. He did miss a lot of games at the upper levels of the minors and came relatively promptly to the big leagues, right? You simply don't see as many left-handed pitchers as righties, right? And so it takes time for or some hitters, it takes time to develop the ability to take advantage of facing opposite-handed pitching. Again, specifically righties facing lefty pitchers, because the reason generally there are splits in that direction is because you have sort of a fraction of an additional second to see the ball and have more opportunity to react to it. That's just the dynamics of where the ball is actually coming from when a lefty throws it to a righty batter. But if you haven't seen a lot of lefties, you just don't have that experience taking advantage of that. And actually it can work against you because it just sort of isn't where your eyes are trained. It's just not your reaction time. And so it can take a little time. Now, challenge with that is if you have a platoon opportunity like the Cubs have now, you're here to win games. Like you can't mess around. Yeah, you can't mess around with. But then the question is, but what if Amaya would be like even better against lefties in the second half of the season if we just gave him that experience seeing more lefties? And I think that's a worthy consideration. It's way beyond the scope of something we could discern on the outside because it's like so fine-tuned to a player's individual development. And like that might not even be the issue with Amaya. It might be something in his swing mechanics, or it might be a fluke. Like there's a million things that could be going into it. But I think it's worth, for the same reason as the pitcher relationships, I just think as the season goes on, it's going to be worth keeping an eye on how well have the Cubs been able to do what they've done so far in terms of optimizing matchups of these catchers. And this, of course, ignores injuries, which are inevitable. So one of them is going to get hurt.
Day game following a night game is another. That's the only time Kelly didn't start against a lefty this year was a day game following a night game. Which, because I was looking at it and I went, oh, he didn't start this one. And I went, oh, let me check the schedule. And I was like, smart. There you go. Yep. I mean, I'm sorry. That does not seem like an accident. That seems like a plan.
No, that's 100%. And I bet you that is like the way it was probably a best laid plans situation. And I'm not aware currently, especially going back to last year, I think Yan Gomes had, I forget who, he may have had a starter that he always caught. And I'm pretty sure Miguel Amaya almost always caught Kyle Hendricks.
He always did catch Kyle Hendricks. Okay. Yeah, I remember
I thought
that.
So. I'm not aware of any this year that are like that. And of course, ideally, you don't want that. That's not
right.
It
happened with David Ross and John Lester all the time. I mean, obviously Ross ended up having a pretty good season, but there was times where you're like, I mean, geez, what a good day for Wilson Contreras to be catching, or Miguel Montero. And it was like, well, it's Lester, so it's Ross,
Yep. You don't want it. It's not ideal. Sometimes you accept it as to get the best out of a pitcher. You just sort of deal with what you have. So no, good note. Cause I was aware of that with the signing that Kelly was better against lefties and Miguel had not had that yet, but I hadn't paid attention or noticed that it was playing out that way so far. So good note. One other thing to mention from these two series on the newsy side of things, we're not going to go too deep because there's going to be more information coming, but so Justin Steele was magnificent against the Rangers. It was arguably his best start going back to July of last year. And unfortunately, turns out late in that start, he was feeling a little something in the elbow. He described it as a little tightness, a little discomfort that was maybe because of the cold. It's hard to say. But then Next day comes, maybe doesn't recover quite as like he typically does. And so Cubs are playing it cautious. Justin Steele hits the injured list. Maybe more information coming on that in terms of imaging. We'll see. He described it as feeling something more or less like what he experienced it was late August into September, tendonitis, just some routine discomfort, if you can ever feel routine about arm-related discomfort for a pitcher.
In the elbow.
In the elbow. But last year, of course, he did come back in 20 days and, he missed essentially 2 starts because of the way the schedule played out. And if he misses 3 starts this time, on the one hand, it sucks because this is still that gauntlet phase of the Cubs schedule. And they will now definitively be without Justin Steele for it. Flip side is one of the starts that he'll miss is in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. I mean, maybe nothing good was going to happen then anyway.
It's not a bad point.
And so I think it's if you're gonna lose a guy, you just always hope it's the minimum. What's interesting is, and I'll get your thoughts on this. We don't yet know how the Cubs are going to backfill because there are off days they can play with. They've got Colin Ray in the bullpen, but he pitched 2 and then 3 innings. He almost was like artificially stretching out. And so, they might go with him. Javier Assad's not ready to come back yet. He's not even on a rehab assignment. Jordan Wicks is, as we record this, scheduled to start today for Iowa. I wouldn't be surprised if he does not take that start. Mm-hmm. And so those are kind of the options. And I should say specifically, the other option is use the off days and Jameson Taillon would start on Sunday instead of Steele. And you would just keep the rotation going that way. And you wouldn't need a 5th starter then until the next week. Yeah. So a lot of options. I think if I know this organization well, they are likely to keep open as many options as possible, not knowing how Friday's game is going to go or Saturday's game. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably what we're going to see over the next 2.5, 3 weeks is people are quick to say, oh, well, that means so-and-so is in the rotation now. I don't know that it's going to look like that. I think they're going to probably play with these things to try to optimize as best they can.
Well, and don't forget it's Craig Counsell, so we can see a bullpen game that's like Colin Ray and Nate Pearson kind of covering multiple innings. I think that Jordan Wicks if it ends up being something that's going to be a medium, term thing, it'll probably be Jordan Wicks because Assad's not ready yet. I think otherwise he would have been the guy.
That's what I'd like to see, by the way.
Me too.
I mean, I'd rather just see him getting
high on Jordan Wicks last year till he got hurt. I mean, I'm also curious to see if he's got the same velocity bump and movement bump that we saw made him look so much more impressive than he had been. And I don't think, just for everyone listening at home, that this is Cade Horton's opportunity. That's not happening yet.
Fun aside, he was scheduled to start yesterday for Iowa. The Steele news comes out, and a little part of me is like, oh, please scratch Cade Horton just so that we can, wonder. They were rained out. So we don't know. So now we don't know.
I was on pins and needles for a second there because I didn't see that they were rained out.
So I suspect it's possible what'll happen is Cade will start tonight's game for Iowa. And they can frame it as, well, we're not holding Jordan Wicks back. We're just, moving everyone back a day and then buy them another day to make a decision. And
because for what it's worth, I think for me, what I think the Cubs hope to happen is Cade Horton gets into a rhythm at Iowa, looks like he's ready to make the jump. And then they wait until there's a long-term opportunity. Sure. Because I think they want Cade Horton to come up once and permanently. I know that there's other ways to do it. I do. And we've seen that with a lot of other pitchers. I don't feel that that's going to be the route for Cade Horton. I think they want to bring him up like the way you bring up Matt Shaw, where it's like, here you go. You're starting now. Whereas, guys like Ben Brown or Javier Assad or not so much Jordan Wicks because he actually did start like
Hayden
in
Wesneski.
Other teams in the past, Hayden Wesneski, where you get some innings in the bullpen, you start, you go back down. It feels different with Cade Horton. He feels like a true top starting pitching prospect. And I feel like a lot of teams around the league don't play that game quite as much, the Cardinals notwithstanding, with those guys. Those guys come up to start to be in the rotation. And I don't think that the Cubs have that opportunity yet.
Agree with everything you said, with the added caveat that because he threw so few innings last year, the development trajectory may be such that it would look like they're playing with those things, like a little time in the bullpen, a little up and down, but it may just be innings management.
Sure.
That, especially if they're thinking, we said this last year, but if they're thinking that the most valuable innings available will come in the second half of the season, then we really could see some play. I tend to think it's more like what you're describing, that they'll just limit his innings at Iowa, and then All-Star break-ish look at, okay, what could we do? Okay, so that's all I had to say on the two series this week. Cubs go to Los Angeles and then San Diego. So tough trip on the way, 6 games. And certainly I'll say in advance, if they want to win the first 2 games of each series and then lose the finale, I will do a dance on the next podcast for that. That would be just fine. So that means we're going to transition into our game. Michael's going to tee it up as he usually does, because he's got the description down and he's got a sponsor to thank. So I'm going to kick it over to him.
Yeah, today's game segment is sponsored by Feldco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. It'd be crazy if they didn't. We pride ourselves on really frustrating our customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, I love that line, Feldco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. Feldco.
That was good, man. You're not topping that one.
That was it.
You have hit your ceiling on ad reads.
Yeah.
Okay. So I tried to think of, because I liked last week for the game how you were like, how dumb is it?
Yeah.
I tried to think of something like that for this, but I don't have it. I like the game. I like what we're doing, but there's no catchy name. So if someone has an idea, they can shoot it to us. But what I had on the brain, and here's how we got here. So obviously we said all last year and the year before, the Cubs, what they need is a superstar. They need a superstar bat. That was this talking point with which we would agree and disagree to varying levels. But generally speaking, when the Cubs acquired Kyle Tucker, I think everyone would agree he is a caliber of bat that the Cubs have not had in a while. And as we've seen in our earlier discussion, even about the offense, the impact he has on the entire offense is significant. And so what I was wondering, given his performance already this year, I had two thoughts about that. What if he just kept doing what he's been doing so far this year for the entirety of the season? How good of a season are we looking at for him? And so I just want to pull up, and then we'll have a pivot from that. So far this year, Kyle Tucker has is worth a league leading 1.2 WAR so far this year, right? If he has a full season, approximately 150 games, that's just 10 times where we're at right now, you're looking at a 12-win season. So first part of the game, Michael, we always talk about, the Cubs need a star. When was the last time the Chicago Cubs had a star of this level of performance over a full season? So I'm talking specifically, when did they last have a 12-win offensive season, the Chicago Cubs?
I mean, so I'm going to, right off the bat, I'm going to go kind of work my way backwards. I know KB's best season wasn't there. I think he had 7.8 WAR or 8
Very
WAR.
Close. Yeah.
I know Jake Arrieta had a 7 WAR season. That was pretty close. Not offensive, obviously, but I know he had a pretty big year. Rizzo never came close to that because, at least defensively, he won't add that sort of value. I mean, is it literally Ron Santo? I don't even know if Sammy Sosa had a 12 WAR season. I'm going to say Ron Santo.
So that is an excellent guess for reasons we will touch upon in part 2 of this. Okay. But here's where I reveal that in part 1, it's all a trick question. They've never had
a
that's
12-win
what season.
I figured.
You could characterize it as close, that in 1929, Rogers Hornsby had an 11-win season for the Cubs.
Well, that is inflation. So that's 13 nowadays,
Are there tariffs on WAR?
Yeah. Right.
So that was the trick there. And indeed, the Cubs have never had, other than the Hornsby season, they've never even had a double-digit
Wow.
win season.
I'll tell you why that doesn't surprise me that much, because I remember like the seasons that stand out as those double WAR seasons from guys around the league. It's like Mike Trout at his prime. And whenever we talk about him at that time, we're like, well, he's the greatest player since XYZ. And so it's like, yeah, that makes sense. The Cubs have never had that guy.
Right. And so that underscores just how obscenely good Kyle Tucker has been through these first 15 games. So maybe you, dear listener, I can hear you through my headphones. You're saying, okay, that is unfair. That's stupid. You're talking about a 15 game sample and trying to extrapolate WAR using that. They're the ones who were beating up their podcast listening device earlier in the conversation when we're talking about just being fans. Okay, fine. I hear you. That is a little ridiculous. Do I actually think Kyle Tucker will put up a 12 WAR season this year? I do not. But he did last year in a half season put up a 4.2 win season. And what I thought about was, well, would it really be so outrageous if he did that caliber performance over a full season? He did it for a half year. Maybe he could do it for a full year. And so I thought, well, how about we give him a full season at last year's clip and we say 8.4 wins? That's still pretty much star level. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious, if he did that this year, where would that put him in the pantheon of Cubs single season positional seasons? And so I'm curious, how many seasons do you think in Cubs history have topped 8.4 wins? And who might some of them be? We know one of them, Rogers Hornsby. You can set that aside.
Okay. I'm gonna guess that Ron Santo had at least one 8 WAR season. 3. Okay, cool. I've gone and looked back at his advanced or at his stats before, and I was like, okay, yeah, I got that one. Man, I'm not sure, and I'm actually almost certain. I don't think Chris Bryant topped 8.4. I think he was under that, right?
7.5 was his MVP.
7.5. That's like 7.8 is where I thought. So, okay. Rizzo definitely did not.
And I want to pause on that just a second for folks. So please keep that in mind. The caliber of performance that we're talking about from Kyle Tucker kind of blows away Chris Bryant's MVP season. That's the kind of season we're potentially talking about from Kyle Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to linger on that too. It's like he is literally the best player the Cubs have maybe ever had, potentially. Like
for a single season, it is absolutely plausible.
He has that sort of upside. Okay, so I'm guessing Ernie had to have done it.
Ernie did it twice. Yep,
twice. Okay. Ron Sandberg probably did it.
Ryan Sandberg just missed his famous 1984 season.
Yeah, right.
8 wins.
That's when I would have guessed. I'm surprised he didn't get closer a second time too. So I named what we had 3 people: Hornsby, Santo, and Banks. Yep. And it's offense.
There's only one more.
Okay.
You might actually be surprised. Or you might be surprised.
It's not Derek Lee 2005, right? I mean,
his has got to be on here somewhere. No, 7.
7. Okay. 7. Again, think about that. People always love to talk
think about that. Everybody talks about
like,
that. Season.
2005. Then, I don't know. I'm blanking. I mean, I guess I could guess Sosa, but like, I don't think it
is.
Oh,
it
okay.
is. And
I'm surprised about that.
It's a little surprising because he didn't, unlike Kyle Tucker at right field, Sam generally not adding a lot of value on defense, which matters. Like, it's not just a artifice of WAR calculation. Like, it matters if you can contribute on defense. But so it's not 1998 as some people might think because of the home run race. His 2001 season was his truly monster season. And the reality was he rated out about average on defense that year, right or wrong. But he was just such a monster on offense that he actually was the closest, other than Hornsby, to get to that double digit 9.9 WAR for Sammy in 2001.
Wow.
If anyone's wondering, the only other player who really came close to the cutoff is Hack Wilson, way back when. You read about that guy if you haven't, man. Interesting life, interesting story. And that's it. That's really it. So you're talking about if Kyle Tucker merely puts up a season like he was having last year over a full season, he will be in the pantheon of Ernie Banks, of Sammy Sosa, of Ron Santo in Cubs' relatively recent memory.
And then obviously, the Ricketts family would have no reason not to extend him under those circumstances because, it would be like so weird to have the greatest season of a Cubs player of all time and then not really give it an earnest effort in trying to extend him, especially when he's like already still pretty young. So you're not doing the Aaron Judge thing at 31, 32. Like, yeah, so let's just hope, because then there's no excuse. There's no possible reason they could possibly, theoretically, potentially give to not extending the greatest Cubs hitter that we have had in, a generation.
I don't know how anyone could argue with that. I think, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get a Tucker jersey because now I know he'll be here for 12 years. There's no worries anymore. Yeah. So we'll probably, I imagine, come back to Tucker a few times this season on
I think so.
The BN Cubs podcast presented by Ankin Law. If you've got legal needs, Howard Ankin is your man. 312-6 million. We love and appreciate them for being our presenting sponsor here on the BN Cubs podcast. I am Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. You are a wonderful listener, and we appreciate you. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing.
I didn't time that right at all.
Yeah, for the video watchers, I should say, rate, review, subscribe, traditional route, or watch us on YouTube, and you can see the stupid thing that Michael just did.
Yeah. Keep it a secret. Don't tell them.
I'm not going to tell the listeners. You're going to have to check out the video version. So thank you. We'll be back next week after the Cubs take 2 of 3 in each of LA and San Diego. Take care.